So the time is now 6:01 Eastern Standard Time, live from New York. We want to thank, on behalf of National Black MBA, our president, Andrew Hamilton of the New York Metro New York chapter. My name is Norville Barrington. We want to welcome you to today's webinar. We have a special guest, and we have a lot to get into on Entrepreneurial Mondays. Just to let you know, feel free to add your comments throughout the chat, and we will have time throughout this conversation to talk candidly about the impacts to businesses regarding the stimulus and what COVID is doing. So please, when we get to that point, you can definitely feel free to add your comments throughout the chat, and we'll definitely and or have opportunities for you to answer questions. Our weekly digital series from National Black MBA Metro New York chapter is sparked by us being able to use the resources that we have in order to help our members and our network be more educated on various topics. This topic today is very important, as we know small businesses are the lifeblood of the United States, especially when you look at New York and the Metro New York area. We want to have this conversation. There's a lot of people that we have in our network. Rafael has been not only a good supporter of National Black MBA, but is a advocate and a leader in the Bronx and New York City. Rafael is the executive director of the Business Initiative Corporation of New York. He serves as the executive director and works to provide businesses with SBA 504 lending. Founded in 1998, the Business Initiative Corporation of New York helps entrepreneurs and companies gain access to private and public funding around New York State. Rafael, along with helping banks develop SBA loans and connecting other resources for New York State and other businesses, entrepreneurs within the area, helps people and helps businesses understand the power of lending and what it can do to help you expedite your growth as a small business. He has won numerous awards, including for Krang magazine as one of the largest SBA guaranteed loan officers. He has supported New York State with over $305 million from banks and private equity investments. He is from the Bronx and now lives in Brooklyn, but of course, he's a big proponent of making sure that businesses across New York City are not only getting loans, but also creating jobs. So we're talking about close to about 2,500 new jobs created. He's also won, again, awards from the Bronx Awards from the SBA New York District Office. He is a graduate of SUNY Empire State College and also attended Fordham Prep as well. So without further ado, I want to welcome Rafael, Executive Director of the Business Initiative Corporation of New York. How are you doing today?
Very good. I want to thank you, Norville, and Andrew for the work that you guys do. And we couldn't do what we do without the support of organizations like yours. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And we're going to jump right into it. So we see $2 trillion. We see additional funding for businesses, corporations, and we're going to get into that. But let's talk about the impact to COVID-19 in terms of the impact into small businesses, and what have you seen in your office has seen throughout this time?
To say it's tragic is an understatement. The social part of this, families losing their breadwinner, the small businesses that have to shut down because their employees have gotten it. It's something I never imagined at all. We've been affected as members of the Greater Bronx as having some of our quarter officers get it. We've had members of the Borough President's Office get it as well. It's been a really tough run for us. But that being said, we've also been big advocates to try and get people the funding that they need, because if there's any time people need it, it's right now.
Now, you work in the Bronx, you support businesses across New York City. Now, when we break down the stimulus, now we're talking about $2 trillion, but no, it's not $2 trillion. So when we talk about small business, how much money roughly is going to small businesses? And there's so many different areas we could tackle from a policy or program perspective, but give us your thoughts in terms of the current stimulus and how it's impacting, possibly can impact entrepreneurs right now.
So the big one is the CARES Act that everybody's heard about. The first part of that affects folks like me that do the 504 loans and 7A loans. If you have a small business and you have one of those loans, the Treasury is going to pay your note, for lack of a better word, your monthly payment for the next 6 months. So that's part of where that $2 trillion came from. There's also some money in there for larger sections and different companies. But really what we care about as far as the money that we've thought about is the PPP loan, which is $350 billion that was earmarked for small businesses. And it was structured for folks that had 500 or less employees. And they wanted you to be able to keep your folks on the books. And it was basically done as a 2.5 times what your company made during an average month. That was what the check you received if you were able to get through. And we'll talk about that later on. But really, that's the big part of this is the PPP program. And there's another program called the EIDL program, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. That program was also already in effect by the SBA. And that'd be the equivalent of if you were in a tornado and they came down and they set up shop in your area and you were given a loan by the SBA or FEMA. That's where that structure really came from. So they could be the first money out on the ground. Now, they were overwhelmed as well, so it's been a little tough for them. But I know people have gotten both programs in the Bronx and throughout the city.
So when we look at those programs and we look at the CARE Act program, there was money that was also sent for training and development. Does that training and development have anything to do with help businesses get back on their feet? If so, can you please touch on that?
So a lot of the training and development I see as, so I'm going to say this to say something else. That money is really for the folks that needed to be brought up to speed to actually process those loans.
Okay.
Because you had people in banks that never looked at a loan document before. And they were actually, and look, this current administration, we all have our issues with them, or I could say I do, but they basically took a program that didn't exist and put it into effect. So in that same turn, they had to train people to be actually, because if you look at that sheer amount of money, you have to have people on the ground to be able to process it. So they use that money to be able to train a teller to be able to look at a loan document and know this is here, this isn't here. And they helped package those loans and send them on through to the federal government. But to your point, I think the next series of stimulus, and it may not be the next one that they're working on right now because Congress just went back to work. But I believe because this is something that's happened on other downturns, there will be a how to modernize your business. And if that's something you are not thinking about, it's something you need to be thinking about. Because that
we're going to definitely touch on that. We're definitely going to touch on businesses and how business models are going to be transformed and what resources are going to be available to that. But I want to make sure that our audience understands from a loan perspective, program perspective, there's really two parts. There's the CARES Act, and then there's it's called the PPP. Is it the what's the acronym?
So it's the Payment Protection Program.
Payment Protection Program.
And that was made effective under the CARES Act.
Okay. So on that note, when companies are with their banks, and they can't get a loan, okay, or they can't get funding, what are some of the steps that they can do in order to help them get funding? What are the other ways that we can get funding for businesses? In addition to that, when you look at businesses, what is the criteria? Let's start there. What is the criteria for a business to actually get this stimulus money?
So really, it's the basis of getting the stimulus money is exactly the same thing that you would do if you were looking to get a loan from a bank, an organization like mine, maybe an economic development corporation, or maybe the smaller groups like Kiva and TrueFund. Is these companies want to see that your business has been profitable, that you know about your business, because the worst part about this is if you sit with someone and you ask them how much money do you need, and they say how much money do you want to lend, or how much money do you have to lend, because that's not the right answer. You need to be able to cash flow this, and it's the same thing as why they're looking at this as 2.5 times, because it's what your business is doing. They don't want to give you anything more than your business can handle. And that's the same thing that we do as loan underwriters, or folks like me who package and get you ready for that process. We want to make sure that as you expand, you have the capital that you need to be able to do that. So we're going to look at what you're doing month to month, maybe what we may be able to chat with you and say, hey, maybe your supply chain's a little bit too long. Maybe you could do something that can tighten yourself up a little bit. It's just like if you're doing a budget for your home. And especially during this time, as things are getting a little tight, we're all kind of doing it, making sure that the money you have on hand is being used for what you need it for. And as you're looking, and it's a rough thing to say, but it's the truth. They're only going to lend to you because you have the money to be able to invest. You need to be able to have that down payment. You need to be able to drive the process, is a better way to put it. You need to be able to know about it.
So you look at driving the process. So we're looking at businesses that are keeping good records of what they've been doing for some time. So would you also say they have either a capability statement or business plan, or records of what they're doing, and maybe a functional website? Are those part of the criteria as going through the process? I just want to make sure we paint the picture for our audience.
So what you should be doing in the very beginning, and you should be doing this as you continue on your journey, is when you get started with your business, you sit with a business counselor. They have business counselors for free at our office at BOEDC, which is 851 Grand Concourse in the Bronx, under an organization called SCORE. Also the small business development centers, which they're at Lehman College in the Bronx, Pace University, Columbia University, Queens College. They have them all over. And that money, they tell you it's free, but that is your tax money paying for those folks. So you should use your tax money and sit with them and say, this is my plan, this is what I want to do. And they will sit with you and help you. They won't do it for you, but they will help you start a business plan. Now, as your business starts to grow, you're going to have to adjust that, because there's certain things that you'll see because you have in your plan that aren't working, things that maybe you weren't sure were going to work are, so you start to readjust it. And that plan will grow with you. It's like a Bible, for lack of a better word. That is how you are going to run your business. So you keep developing that strategy. As you get that fleshed out, you'll notice the business will run better. You'll know a little bit more. You'll know all sides of it. So then when you come and sit with somebody like me, I tell people to keep it all in a binder, an old school 1990s when we were in high school binder, and you stick everything in there. So when you sit with somebody like me, if you're not sure, you've got your profit and loss for the last year in there. You've got what your payroll was, what your utilities are. If you know what you should know what the property values are around you. Because as you start to look to expand, maybe it makes more sense to buy something than it does to rent. Maybe if you buy something, you're actually saving money. But you won't know unless you have it all in one place that you can reference it. So that's why I say you should have a business plan. You should be developing that business plan. And no matter what stage you are, you should be still going back and taking advantage of having chambers of commerces, professional organizations. Your peers will help you with that, and they will streamline you. They will streamline you because you will know how good you are in comparison, because you'll be able to get contracts. There's certain advantages to being able to have all this stuff. You can register yourself with the state or with the city as a minority or woman-owned small business, and they're going to ask you for all that stuff. And if you have it right in front of you, now you're at the front of the line for folks when the city's trying to give contracts out. And then when I look at your business, when you're trying to try and buy a new piece of equipment, or maybe it's not for me, but I can direct you to the person that you're for. And all that stuff will be in that business plan.
I think what you laid out was a good foundation, and it allows people to understand that, record keeping and being able to manage your business both in paper and how you present your business is going to be important. And your network, as you mentioned, definitely plays a big part of that in terms of having those relationships with organizations, with the loan officers. And this is where maybe we see most companies or most home businesses not being able to get necessarily the loans when they want it because they don't necessarily go through the process. Is that safe to say?
Yes. Bad advice really hurts. I'm seeing it now with this program per se. Folks that in a cash business, like a pizzeria, a restaurant, where everything is kind of coming in cash, and you're not really keeping great records. Well, now that you're looking to be helped by the federal government or folks like me, or our larger EDC is Bronx Economic Development Corporation, Overall Economic Development Corporation. And we also have a loan program specifically designed for Bronx businesses. But if you're showing a loss, it's really hard for us to be able to, and not just us, anyone who does a loan, really hard to get to that next step to say, this person can afford it, because by all the paperwork, they can't. You may have driven up to the meeting in a caddy, but that doesn't mean that the paperwork reflects that.
So now let's kind of shift gears here, because we laid a foundation of companies in terms of home businesses, what they should be doing. And this is good advice in terms of going forward, because we do know that something like this can happen. Now, let's look back in history before we start talking about business models and talking about the stimulus package and the phases of them. But this is not the first time we went through this in terms of disasters and the government bailing us out. Can you just touch on for our audience how this process happens more often than people think?
Yeah, it's people don't realize it, but it's a cycle. This one went a little longer than most, and it usually happens every 8 to 10 years, where you'll get a good run, and then some part of the economy screws it up, whether it be it was the tech companies during the late 90s that overvaluated themselves, and then when they had to figure out what they really cost, the economy then realized, oh, they're really not worth that much. And then the Enron stuff also helped during the early 2000s, leading into the Great Recession, which was the banks, ironically enough, selling fake mortgages. But before that, it's something that we've seen in our economy. I was watching a documentary because I was trying to fall asleep about the Civil War, and going into the Civil War, we were in the middle of a recession. It's that far back when our economy even wasn't as complex as it is now. These things have happened. So it's one of the reasons why we tell people you should be organized, and you should know how you know your parents, you know your siblings, you know your kids, is how you should know your business. because it's the only way when you get through one of these hard times. And I can tell you this, I have been in a loan committee meeting where they've looked at somebody and they were on the fence, and they looked at when the business started and they went, oh, they've been in business since 1995. That means they've been through 2 downturns. Okay, that guy's a good operator. And it's as simple as that. They will look at past performance to indicate future progress.
Now, when we look at our current state and we look at opportunities, so now there's funding from the government. Let's talk about unconventional funding and what that could possibly look like. Can you just touch on, for our audience, what are some areas or some opportunities that we haven't tapped in terms of funding your business, especially in times such as this?
So there are nonprofits like Kiva, True Fund. They're smaller guys that, as your business grows, you may not be ready, or you may not need a $250,000 loan. You may only need 50 to 75. But as you look for that money from those fundraising sources, there's one thing that I want to throw in, is you want to make sure you're getting it from a credible place. There's nothing worse than hearing that someone got something from a payday loan and now they're paying 25% on a $60,000 loan, or every time they sell something, it comes out of their bottom line at the end of the week. There's ways to do this. If you're not sure, I'd rather you call me. We can share my information at the end, and I will try and put you in the right hands. We have partners in the Bronx that can kind of get you through this. I was talking before we came on earlier, I was exchanging emails with the folks over in the Greater Hunts Point Economic Development, because they have a whole bunch of new things that they've just posted up on their site. And that was one of the things that they're talking about, is especially in that neighborhood, in the minority of the Latino community, we are kind of preyed on because we don't speak English. So you have someone who's dressed in a suit who looks nice, and they can convince someone to go through that sort of funding. And that kind of sort of capital costs you more in every way.
So let me just ask you this. Let me just ask you this for a quick moment. So what is the average interest rate that we should be looking at in this particular time frame? I see 2 to 5. I see, I see 7. What's something that's standard in this dynamic that we're in right now?
That's a really good question, because this is not like a time we've ever seen. If you were to get a loan from me on a 504, my interest rate right now is less than what you're getting on an EIDL loan from the federal government for the injury disaster relief loan. So, and I guess that's part of what this time is we have to now figure out what things really cost. We were on a conference call earlier today with some folks in Hunts Point and out in Port Morris, and that's kind of what we were talking about, is we really don't know what property values are right now. We think we do. We have a good idea. We have a range. So to say all that, I'll say this. For a 504 loan right now, you're probably paying somewhere between 2.5%. It could go up a little more. A standard bank loan would probably be somewhere around 6 to 7. It depends on where the bank really wants to be. Some banks will be less if your credit's better. Some banks will be more. The guys who are, I would say, the outward presence, maybe your credit's not that great, should be charging you somewhere between 9 and 12%. Anything more than that, and you're really in a bad spot, and you really shouldn't. That money's too expensive, and you should be trying to get it some other way.
So now, does it matter in terms of the loan qualification? We have a number of our members and people on our network who maybe are sole proprietors. It's themselves. They don't necessarily have an office or storefront, but they provide services. working with corporate clients, things of that nature. So does that play into it as well?
For folks like that, I know it's much more difficult than someone who has a brick and mortar. It's much easier to say, especially you got to understand, and that's what this is going to do. The old school way of thinking is my business is on that corner. That's where my office is. That's where we go every day. As we move forward, we have already seen a switch to that's not how business gets done anymore. The 1099, and that was one thing that I will give the administration credit for. They actually included those folks in the PPP program. In the past, folks like that would not have gotten money. It would have been, sorry, you have to apply for unemployment. But at least now they're starting to realize that the gig economy, because that's what they're calling it in the buzzwords, that's what we need to start to look to. Now, folks like me, yeah, my bread and butter is still made on the brick and mortar, having a warehouse somewhere. But when it comes to different loans and different funding to be able to expand, like if you're a construction company and you want to be able to hire other 1099s to help you on a project, there is funding out there. It's hard to get because it's just not something that's done all the time. You will pay to get that kind of funding. And that's what I mean. Those are the guys that, the lines of credit may be, 12% on something like that. I'm just putting that number out there on the high end because it's just not a normal, what the banks consider normal. There is going to be a new normal. So that's something that as a community is on that side, we're going to have to start to look at.
Now, you also have some of our members who are part of nonprofits, who lead nonprofits, who are in that space. Can you touch on the nonprofit aspect and how this bill has affected the nonprofit industry?
This is, it's been really, really tough. I sit on the board of 7, 5 for the borough president as bids, because bids are considered 501c3s. They're the business improvement districts all set up throughout the city. I sit on the Brooklyn Hispanic Chamber. There's just what we've tried to do is look forward with these things. This program really did have some things for those folks as well. There was part of the stimulus money that was for that particular industry. The trouble is that a lot of those guys got checks in January, or they got checks, I believe, in March, April, which would have been prior collected money. What happens going forward? And I've heard that on and on from those folks because I know the bids, for instance, are due to get checks in July. But there's no one collecting property taxes right now because everyone is being deferred. Or you can request to be deferred. We don't know what it looks like. So we're hoping that there's enough people that have paid in that maybe we can give someone some money because your bid, Southern Boulevard, let's put it. The people in Southern Boulevard in the Bronx or Church Avenue here in Brooklyn, it's those merchants in that area that get taxed that help support that bid. So if people in that area were able to pay, maybe the city can't hold that money, but it just won't be as big a check going to the bids as they normally would get. And I'm sure all the other nonprofits are going to go through the same growing pain right now.
So you're still, just to understand, so from a cyclical perspective, they pay their taxes, that money goes back into their community, exactly. And then those bids are able to disperse throughout those businesses. Is that correct? Is that, okay.
Yeah, so they provide services for the businesses, whether it be sanitation, sometimes it's security, sometimes it's more light, whatever the businesses feel they need to operate effectively within that corridor. And then they advocate for them on the city level and on the state level to try and get more money in. But much like I said, it's tough right now because the money they would normally get, and you can say that for every plan, every nonprofit right now, the dues are going to be harder and harder to come by for the short term, at least. So being able to prepare yourself, or at least, and I will say, even though they've told you the money has run out of the PPP and the EIDL programs, you should still have your application ready to go, or if not, submitted with your bank. Because if it gets refunded again, or they re-up the money and they refill the bucket, you will be there for the next filling. So I'm recommending that everyone, if you have not done it, that you do it now.
So we're going to take a pause before we shift gears. We're going to open up to Q&A. Now, this is very interactive, so if you have a question, we'll take the question right now before we switch gears. So you can take yourself off mute. Hey, go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
I just wanted to throw in too. There's also organizations that are nonprofits that leverage banks or larger businesses, and so there's grants out there. So you can go and I know Sam Adams, the beer company, as weird as that may sound, is doing grants. Facebook is doing grants. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is doing grants. And when you see the number says 5,000 or 1,000 or 10,000, you go, man, I need more than that. If you apply for 4 or 5 and you get 2 or 3, it's the collective and it's a grant. You don't have to pay it back. As much as I like to give you our money from BOEDC or get you an EIDL loan, that's still money you have to pay back. So if you can leverage the free money that's out there, you should be doing that as well.
That's a good point. That's a good point. We're going to definitely come back to the corporations. Questions from the audience? All right. Well, we have a question online here. So as a sole proprietor, we have a sole proprietor who has no office space, but they do have monthly income coming in. Unfortunately, monthly business income thus far has taken a severe hit, about $5,000 because of canceled events. In terms of 2021, how would that impact him from a program or service or grant perspective? What might he be eligible for? Does he have to do any tax filing? Is there any other ways to make sure that he can capitalize on maybe that $5,000 that he would have gotten within this time frame? Hopefully I'm answering the question right.
You should definitely be in touch with where those vendors are. You need to know the difference between if the event is just canceled or if it's being postponed and done later on. Because absolutely, to his credit, then that's money that is coming to him once that particular event gets executed. So you should still be in contact with those folks, and it's the little things of you be in contact with him, and then you're talking, and then you never know what that person may need that you can connect to, or maybe you can help them. So yes, you should be in contact with everybody who you have something that may be canceled. Now, the PPP program, like we mentioned, also is in effect for those folks. But you have to remember that you have to use 75% of that money toward your payroll. So you really shouldn't be asking for more than what you can ramp up for. If you have 1 or 2 employees, and it's probably easier for you than somebody who's like a printer and may have 7 or 8. So you have to kind of plan this money. I think I've said it at events that I've spoken with you guys before. Your accountant and your attorney are the folks that you should be talking to right now to make sure that if you take this money, you can ramp up in time to make it a grant. Because you have to remember, if you take the PPP and you can't get back to where you were before, and you don't have to hire the same people, you can hire other people. But if you can't get back to that same amount, it becomes a loan. So as you look at all this stuff, and that's why I say leverage the free money first. Get all of that stuff. Make sure that your clients, if they're canceling events, they plan to put them on later, or know what the option is going to be or what you need to do to react. And I hope I answered
So,
them.
yeah, no, I think you were able to. Thank you. And let's go to grants. So you mentioned that before. Now, where can people actually find grants? You mentioned some companies here, but is there a centralized place? Or are there some key areas where grants can be easily found? What advice would you give to our audience?
So I know Forbes.com has a link that they update of and this is every state, including Puerto Rico in the U.S. You can go and see what grants are available in your area. The first thing I think they have is like loans, and then at the end of the loan, you can see what grants are available. But even their list isn't complete. I know the small business development centers are doing a pretty good job putting that stuff up on their websites. I know Pace University put a bunch up today on their small business development site. And I know theirs was the Alice program, which you have to be able to show that your business has taken a hit from COVID-19. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, eBay, because their folks are 1099, so they're doing stuff for small businesses as well. So I know the money is out there. I know of one business in the Bronx was able to take advantage of, I think it was Chase has a small business program too that they applied for. So it's out there. I can try and find, I have a running list, and I could share that as well.
Thank you. Our audience would definitely appreciate that. We also have, and we thank George Cynthias, our VP of administration, who's on the call as well, just put a link for our audience. And thank you so much. He is a small business owner in Harlem, Harlem Insurance. If you check the handle Harlem Insurance of his agency, which is the Santias Agency in Harlem. Also another question from one of our chief of staff, actually, from our chapter, wants to know about origination fees. Now, with all these new programs, buyer beware. Let's talk about the fees for a moment and how people get caught up in, getting into the wrong program. So are there fees to set up some of these activities, some of these opportunities?
Absolutely. Even the PPP program, if there is a 0.5% worked into it.
Okay.
So there is a fee in that. The only program that I've heard of that doesn't have a fee was the one in the Bronx that we are doing, but there is an application to that, and I believe it's only $35, but it's minimal, because really our focus is to try and give these guys a lifeline until the larger money comes in. But yeah, so I know if you do a 504 loan with me, we charge you 1.5%. And that can be paid either at closing, or we can roll it into the loan. So it's there's different, the bank will charge you fees too when they do it if you just do a straight bank loan. So yeah, there are origination fees in every single one of these loan documents that you see.
We'll go into one more question before we go to kick it over to another topic here. So we have a question regarding insurance in terms of, do lenders look at having insurance on your accounts receivable as being favorable?
So we will, yes. There's different things that we look at. When we sit down and we go through everything, we will, because we understand the fact that sometimes you guys aren't going to get paid on money that you have out. That's just, or the payment may come a little late. You have slow pay. There's, we've been doing it long enough that we understand that it's just not, I signed a deal, you'll pay me in 40 days, and that's how it works. No, we understand sometimes the guy that says 40 days, the guy he sold to hasn't collected everything yet, or There was another investor that came in, and you're trying to restructure something, and it may take us maybe another 2-3 weeks to get the money in place. So sometimes we will ask to show that when you are at least in the structure part.
Okay.
To protect your cash flow. There's other insurance things that we will probably ask you to do, or that we really recommend you do, like a business interruption policy. A business interruption policy, I can tell you I had a business in the South Bronx that never missed a payment. And then the city came in and started to redo the sewers in front of their building. And who wants to buy food when it smells like rotten eggs because they're messing with the sewer?
Right.
And I've had another supermarket that basically had every other business on their block shut down because of a state project that ran. So if you're familiar with the South Bronx, Soundview floods almost all the time, anytime there's a heavy rain. Well, it only took the city 75 years, 80 years to address it, and they're doing that right now. But in doing that, they basically killed a bunch of the small businesses in that area because no one. So, and my guy who was in that area has been able to survive, but he didn't have business interruption insurance. So there's certain insurances that should be in place. We may require you to have life insurance if you're the key operator of your business. So there's certain things that we'll recommend that you have. That particular insurance of having something on your accounts payable or receivable or making sure is something we may not necessarily do. We like to see it, but really it's other things that we'll have you do to protect yourself and your family, because God forbid something happens, you want your business to continue.
Now, we talked in the past about, well, what does this mean going forward? You mentioned something that was very key. What we've been going through in some type of fashion, some type of way have been going on since the Civil War. Most recently, we've seen 9/11, things unexpectedly happen. You see the boom, the dot-com bubble that burst. We also have seen the recession. We've seen Sandy. So what does this really mean for businesses now? What should businesses be doing? We talked about the structure. We talked about recording, but in terms of the way we operate, how are you looking at companies, whether they're brick and mortar, whether they're online, or whether they're providing a service? How is this going to change the way businesses are going to be funding going forward? More importantly, how are businesses going to be operating in terms of being profitable in another pandemic or something else that could happen?
That's something I've been thinking about our own functionality as an economic development corporation. How are we most effective? How can we still reach as many people as we need to reach, even though we are stuck at home? Maybe we can only go into the office. Maybe it's 2 days a week. We don't know what the new functionality of the world is, but we still need to operate, and we still need to try and bring in the revenue that we need to help our businesses move on and succeed. So you should be looking at what your future looks like. Like I said, I'm doing it for us. I'm trying to figure out, do we have more things online? Do we have our documents online? Do we make it easier? How do we make it easier for folks to interact with you? I have become more tech savvy than I ever thought I was over the last 6 weeks. I've actually been in quarantine a little bit longer than everybody else because I happened to travel to an area that got hit as I was leaving. So my office decided that I should stay at home for a little bit longer, which kept me actually safer than I ever imagined. But we have all started to think about, and we've talked about it even with our own existing businesses. If you're a printer, if you're a restaurant, what is your web presence like? How are you advertising to the people in your area? How are you gathering those folks? How are you leveraging every opportunity you have that's close to you. You may be used to just using Grubhub, but Grubhub's also charging you a percentage. They're also doing an override on what you do if you're a restaurant. How do you work around that? Or maybe you negotiate with them and you try and figure out a better way to do it. Maybe there's someone on this call right now who already has a website that's figuring that stuff out. But you need to start to look at what you want your business to look like, not just 6 months from now, but 2 years from now. And start those plans now. Because usually when you do these kind of things, it costs money. So you need to be able to either have the money moving forward or at least have the idea and utilize all the free stuff that you have on your computer, like a Zoom account. Like I said, you have the small business development centers that you can sit and talk with and say, this is what I want to do. How do I redo my business plan, or how do I add this? Or maybe your business is okay because there are some folks that are doing all right, but this now adds an opportunity for you to add another layer to your revenue stream that you didn't have going into this.
So let's say this. So you're a business right now, let's say regardless of the business you have, and because of the situation you have now, decide to close your business down. You decide to now get your business back up and running or start a new business. Do loan officers or do banks, do we look at that differently as you're looking to come up with a new business plan or a new business to launch? Is that going to impact possible funding going forward?
If you are leaving the actual industry that you were in, absolutely. If you're a restaurateur and you're used to doing restaurants, or if you're a trucking company and you've been doing trucking, but now all of a sudden you want to switch to restaurateur if you're a trucker, or you're a restaurateur that wants to be a trucker, of course they're going to say, well, he doesn't have a track record doing that. But if you're going to tweak your business plan to still be in that model, or just change the model so that you're still in that industry, but maybe you're a restaurant, but maybe you realized doing larger, like you want to serve meals through Meals on Wheels through the city, because there are contracts that people are doing those things right now, where their restaurant is closed to the public or they're only doing takeout in evenings, but these guys are still going in at 6 a.m. to have fulfill orders for folks that are at home, for the precincts, because you unfortunately still have people that are doing things and need to be fed. You have people in hospitals that need to eat. So there's different things that if you can restructure how you do your job or how you do what you do, and you see, because right now I'm guarantee you there's folks that didn't realize that Baldors. So Baldors and let's say Down East Foods were both companies that delivered mainly to restaurants. But now they're actually delivering to people's homes and filling in the gap because Peapod and Instacart and these other apps couldn't get it done. So they're filling it in. Now, the worst part for those other guys is that now these guys have figured out they can do it. So when everybody comes back online, they may add a couple smaller trucks that can do that particular part of the industry. You can find that part of the industry of what you do and kind of just adapt a little bit. And then as you move forward, go, can I make more money doing it this way? And if you're going to do that, a banker will go, wow, that's actually pretty smart. And they may give you a little grief, but it's really to make sure that your idea is fully fleshed out.
So I know we're going to open up to a couple more questions before we close off here, but what are some things, what are some last comments that you would have? You mentioned some key things. You talked about the infrastructure in terms of documentation. You talked about the important people that you need to have in your corner. You talked about the lawyer. You talked about the accountant. You talked about not only the relationships, but things we need to do going forward and making sure you're prepared, even if you don't get that loan. What are some last minute things that you should do right now? What would you leave with the audience right now in terms of not only grants, free money, but what are some other things that you didn't mention?
Right now, since everybody's at home, if something like this is absolutely the best thing in the world, is connecting with the folks that are part of your network. If you're a member of the National Black MBA Association, you should be in contact with everybody you know as part of the National Black MBA Association, because you don't know what opportunities, how you could support each other, maybe coming out of this, or maybe just at home. Maybe you just need someone that can help you. If you're an accountant, but you got laid off because there's no one in your office, you could support on another side. You should be trying to leverage if you're a member of the Bronx Chamber, or you're a member of the Brooklyn Chamber, or any of those kind of organizations, you should be looking at they are there for you when things are good and when things are bad. And that's one of the things that we have to remember is things are bad for me, I don't want to bother them. No, that's what we're here for. We're here. I've realized during this time, my job is much more than just loaning money. It's a weird thing to say, but you get invested in the people that you give money to. I think I've made the joke to you before. I'm with these guys longer than their wives are usually, or their husbands are. I have a 25-year loan and I'm not going anywhere. So you have me in your corner. Use me. And I've had it. I have a woman in Brooklyn who's called me up. I've had a person in upstate New York call me up. This is going to sound weird, but we tried to help a farmer in upstate New York kind of get his food to market, because it was just in his field and he couldn't get people to access him. I had a guy who's one of my clients in the Bronx, and I just happened to be walking past a store here in Brooklyn, and he said, I need someone to cut glass for me. And I can't get anyone to cut glass. And I said, I know a guy who cuts glass, and I introduced them, and he did the work for him. It's just the little things. Leverage the people you have and tell them what your needs are. They may not be able to help you right now, but as you start the process and you start talking to other people that have needs, you start to put everyone together. So you should be leveraging the networks you have at home. You should be looking to start planning for the future. And you should be staying safe. We need you on the other side to keep this thing going. So make sure you guys are staying healthy. You're doing what you got to do to protect your families and yourselves.
Now, just to let the audience know, National Black MBA Metro New York chapter is going to work on a number of resources for our audience and for our members and for our network. So more to come on that. We're going to try to compile as much information as possible. More importantly, as we do get more information, as more information regarding the new stimulus packages do come out, we're going to make sure we stay on top of that. And just to note on that, what should the audience and what should our network look forward to in terms of new stimulus grants or new stimulus that are going to come out, programs that are going to come out within the next, let's say, weeks or so?
So the big one that everyone's talking about right now, and that's someday we all hope to have a business like this, is the Main Street loan program. But that is going to be for folks that have a $2.5 billion annual revenue. And
we got a couple of those people on the call. I'm going to claim it right now. I have a couple of people on the call. So we're people of faith.
That's it. That's where we all want to get to. So that's really made for the medium to larger size business to be able to keep liquid, because even those guys are having trouble right now with their liquidity. So what the Treasury is doing is they're actually buying those loans to restructure them so that those companies can continue to keep people on payroll, so they don't have to put people on unemployment. And the whole thing behind it is that, yes, we will restructure you, but that doesn't mean as a bank that you then pull the credit from that guy.
Okay.
They want to be able to still have that guy have that line of credit out.
So wouldn't that impact supply diversity as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
We have a ton of businesses that fall within that range. I wouldn't be surprised if because we do have businesses that are 35, 40 person businesses that generate a ton of money. that may qualify under that loan program. So we are asking everybody to keep paying attention because they're talking about that one as the big one, but the PPP and the EIDL program are right behind it. And those guys just got back to work in DC today. So I'm expecting over the next, and mind you, I understand the programs probably weren't executed as cleanly as all of us wanted it to be. They wrote a brand new law and they wrote brand new policy, and they actually kept changing it right up until the day they actually said the money ran out. So
okay.
it's an ongoing process, and that's the same thing for this Main Street program. It's still not in writing, so I like to address it that it's out there, but how these things are distributed could change too. So you should be watching because the EIDL program, the PPP, and Main Street, they're still trying to figure out how we best get this money to people. So we meaning because my money comes from the federal government, so I'm talking about them as me. We're still trying to figure out how we can get the money out better. So
now,
watching, keep being on the calls because that will be updated and it'll change. I know it'll change. So we need to, all of us, watch and share any information that you have.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to kick it up to our audience. Any questions from the room? You can use the chat feature, or you can take yourself off mute in regards to any questions you have for Rafael.
Hey, this is Emmanuel Jules on the call. How are you, Norville?
Yes, how are you?
I'm great. Can you hear me, Rafael?
Absolutely, sir.
Yes, I am a small business owner, currently located in Queens, New York. Yeah, my business has definitely felt the impact of COVID-19, where cash flow has halted. You know, I have outcome, but not income, if you know what that means. So my question is, for all the grants or even loans out there, what would be your best advice to how I can go about putting myself in the best position to acquire, I wouldn't say the most, I would say what I guess I'm eligible to apply for?
Yeah, I would definitely start to go through, I know the Long Island City Partnership, which is a Long Island City bid, has been doing a really good job out there. They have teamed up with the Greater Jamaica Chamber, and they have, I think it's on the Long Island City's bid, they actually have links for people, just Queens bid businesses, it's not city programs, but just Queens businesses.
Okay.
They also do have links for other programs. So you should be looking at this like you're trying to get funding when you first started your business. You should have your profit and loss statements, what you've done for the last year, your personal taxes, the business taxes, and keep them all like a cowboy. You keep it right on your belt so that if somebody asks you to come up with all of this, you can just send it in an email and you have it ready to go. I've been sending people the personal financial statement that I have people do for the SBA. And I say, yes, this is overkill, but if you can fill this out, it means that you will have enough information out there that no one's going to ask you for anything more. You gave it to them. The same thing for I can't remember the name of the personal financial statement, but the business asset statement, debt statement is the 2202. That's another one. If you fill that out, you will have every asset your company has and every debt your company has all on one sheet. So you will be able to then provide it to anyone who's looking for your grant money, your income, for a loan and you have it handy. Yes, it's going to take you, because I get it. Not everyone is in this world, so it may take you a little bit longer than some of us to do. But if that's the case, also you have an accountant doing your accounting, you probably have that information already somewhere in that information. So if you ask him, I need a profit loss for the last 3 months, he should be able to pull it. You should be able to pull it from your QuickBooks. When you apply for these loans also, if you use a company like ADP, ADP is actually doing the math for you. So you can go onto your ADP site and tell them, I think it's called the COVID-19 report, as straightforward as that is. And different payroll sites may call it different things, but it's the same information that's going to be needed in the PPP. And they'll do the calculation for you. They'll figure out what you're paying for your payroll, your IRAs for your people, if you're doing that kind of thing. But all the things that you are sending to the federal government to show that you're paying these things for your employees, they roll it into you. So you just print it out and you have it, and you're able to submit that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. We'll take another question from our audience.
I actually have one more question.
Yeah.
If that's okay. Given that there's many grants out there, do I just stick with one, or pretty much just apply to all of them that's out there?
Take advantage of anything you got. Unless they tell you you can only apply to this one and no one else, which I haven't seen that yet, I would take advantage of anything you could take advantage of.
Okay.
I would rather you use free money than use my money. That's you are going to have to pay me back. At least that you can use it, and then you just want to make sure what you have to use it for. That's the only caveat I will tell you is, if they're telling you have to use it for payroll, know that if you apply for a PPP loan, now you have 2 payrolls, and you got to know how to execute that. If it's a working capital loan, so you can then buy what you need to run your business or a grant, then that's fine. But you need to just know what you're going to use that money for, or make sure it's not earmarked for something that you have to use it for. So that's the only thing I tell you, is just watch what you're supposed to use it for, and make sure you're keeping track as you apply to these things, so that you're not, if you have to use it by a certain time, you're not going to screw yourself up by having too much money on hand. Right. You don't want to have to pay anybody back.
God, okay, understood. Thank you so much.
Well, Rafael, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. We want to just turn over to Andrew Hamilton, our president of the Metro New York chapter, for some closing remarks, and then I'll come back and give you some additional information. Andrew? Hey, everybody. Good evening. Rafael, again, thank you so much for giving your time. It's great that, disseminate this information to our community and our network at large. Special thanks to my fellow chapter presidents, Amelia, Deb, and Latoya. Thanks so much from Charlotte, San Francisco, and Chicago. It means a lot to support here in New York, and hopefully move things forward. To our a wonderful friend, Vanetta Hawkins from Wells Fargo. Thanks for joining the call as well. But again, these web series are for you, for the community, and more importantly, to inform, to invest, and inspire us to do bigger and greater things. And Rafael, thank you so much again for disseminating information. And I think that's it. Thanks, Norville. Appreciate it. No problem. And on behalf of the National BlackMBA Metro New York chapter and all of our chapter presidents, we just want to thank you, Rafael, for this great information. Again, like Andrew mentioned, please, audience, if you go to our website, nyblackmba.org, if you check our Instagram handle, nyblackmba, There's additional information, additional resources. Any questions that we're not able to answer here, we will forward over to Rafael. Rafael will definitely answer those questions for you. And we want to thank you again. We know at 8 o'clock we're going to have a rematch of Teddy Riley and Babyface. Let's see if that works. We're going to leave with that closing joke. But thank you very much, everyone. My name is Norville Barrington, Vice President of the Metro New York chapter and part of bccelerator, advancing Black entrepreneurship. We want to thank you so much for attending today's webinar. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.